FCCC, UNEP, and IRENA. My name is Simon Bemeraz from IRENA, and pleasure to welcome you to the session titled Unlocking Africa's Sustainable Energy Potential, Challenges, Opportunity, and Innovation. I welcome Gürbüz Gönül, the Director of Country Engagement and Partnership at IRENA, for the introduction and the welcoming remark.
Thank you, Simon. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to all of you, and very much appreciate your presence early in the morning in the session. And we are looking forward to very good and fruitful discussions over the next 1 hour on this event. We will be looking into the issues surrounding unlocking Africa's sustainable energy potential, having a deep dives and different perspectives from the participants on the challenges and opportunities, as well as innovation action around it. And I would like to, before we start the discussion, I would like to set the scene and provide you some perspectives from the IRENA side and how we see energy transition happening globally, but also looking into some of the insights into African energy transition and some of the challenges and opportunities ahead of us. I have a brief presentation to make, and if yes, it's already on the screen. If you can move to the next slide, please. All right. Let me start with providing you and IRENA's World Energy Transition, some of the key messages coming from the IRENA's World Energy Transition Outlook, which is a flagship publication of the agency. The outlook shows that power generation needs to triple by 2050 if we want to stay on track with the 1.5 degree climate objective. And 90% of all decarbonization in 2050 will involve renewable energy through direct use of low-cost renewables, efficiency, electrification, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, as well as green hydrogen. Annual deployment of 1,000 gigawatt of renewable power is needed to stay on 1.5 degree track. In 2022, some 300 gigawatt of renewables were added globally, accounting for 83% of new capacity additions, compared to 17% coming from fossil fuel and nuclear energy combined. Both the volume and share of renewables need to grow substantially, which is both technically feasible and commercially viable. Every year, the gap between what is required and what is achieved continues to grow, signaling that significant acceleration is needed across energy sectors and technologies, from deeper end-use electrification of transport and heat to direct renewable energy use, energy efficiency, and necessary infrastructure additions. The reasons for urgency of acceleration is that any lack of progress will increase future investment needs and the cost of worsening climate change effects. Next slide, please. As per the current national plans that the governments have, the annual emissions would decline only slightly to 34 gigatons of carbon dioxide in 2050. By contrast, to meet Paris Agreement commitments, IRENA's 1.5 degree scenario plots a steep and continuous drop to net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. This scenario, 1.5 degree scenario, depends on a steep reduction in global emissions through 2030, and then this will be followed by a continued downward trajectory, reaching net zero by 2050. Substantial efforts are needed in sectors such as power, heat, industry, with negative emissions delivering the necessary additional carbon reductions. Next slide, please. The remarkable reduction in costs of renewable electricity sources over the past decade is nothing short of a game changer for our energy landscape. The cost of renewable electricity has come down. Solar power fell by 85% between 2010 to 2020, concentrating solar power CSP by 68%, onshore wind by 56%, and offshore wind by 48%. These numbers not only illustrate the rapid technological advancements in the renewable energy sector, but also highlight its growing cost competitiveness. In 2022, the global weighted average cost of electricity from solar PV, onshore wind, CSP, bioenergy, and geothermal, they all fell. This trend is an evidence to the continuous innovation and scaling up of renewable technologies, making clean energy more accessible and affordable for communities worldwide. Next slide, please. Renewables could decarbonize 90% of the power sector by 2050, but between now and 2050, 150 trillion US dollar in investments would be required under the 1.5 degree climate scenario. The yearly average amount of investment is 5.3 trillion US dollars. And if you put it in another way, this is an additional 1.7 trillion US dollars per year compared to the current plans by the governments. Although global investments across all energy transition technologies reached a record high 1.3 trillion US dollars in 2022, annual investment must more than quadruple to remain on the 1.5 degree pathway. Renewable energy investments remain concentrated in a limited number of countries and focused on only a few technologies. Greater volumes of funding need to flow to other energy transition technologies such as biofuels, hydropower, geothermal energy, as well as sectors beyond power, where we have lower shares of renewables in total final energy consumption, such as heating and transport. Next slide, please. If we turn to Africa, the share of renewable energy in the African electricity generation has seen a steady increase, rising from 20% in 2013 to 24% in 2022. This upward trend underscores the need to harness Africa's abundant, untapped renewable energy potential. Among renewable energy sources, three stand out with highest installation capacities. These are hydropower, solar photovoltaic, and onshore wind, demonstrating their pivotal role in the transition to clean energy. Solar PV has witnessed a remarkable expansion, with installed capacity skyrocketing from approximately half a gigawatt in 2013 to 11.5 gigawatt last year. This substantial increase highlights the growing prominence of solar PV as a key contributor to African renewable energy capacity. Last slide, please. And we have been supporting the development of Continental Master Plan for Africa, closely working with African institutions and power pools. And if you look at some of the numbers coming out from this master plan, the regional breakdown of Africa organized into power pools, it reveals a significant shift away from oil and coal for all African regions in 2040, with the focus prominently shifting towards renewable energy technologies, specifically solar, wind, and hydropower. This transition highlights the profound shift towards cleaner and more sustainable energy sources across the continent. This is all I wanted to say at the beginning, and very much looking forward to discussions, fruitful discussions, and very much also looking forward to hearing our distinguished panelists starting with some introductory remarks by Kande Yunkala. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Director Gonul. We're gonna move now to the next part of the event and with the panel. So I invite our moderator, Elizabeth, who will now introduce the panel.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth. I serve with IRENA. I coordinate the agency's engagement with member countries and partners in the region. And I'm most pleased to be moderating this session this morning. So, ladies and gentlemen, this year, the first ever stocktake is scheduled to conclude at COP28. Will tell us the progress against the goals and ambitions set out against the Paris Agreement at COP21. We all know that although promising efforts are being applied towards advancing climate action, the world is still falling behind. Joining me today is a distinguished panel to share their perspectives on opportunities and challenges in enhancing action for our global collective progress. In particular, we shall hear about the measures, practices, example of various aspects of how enabling environments, structuring of support will help address barriers and support African countries to advance energy transition. So in this regard, I'm pleased to introduce my panelists. I'll begin with Dr. Yunkela, who is the Chair of Presidential Initiative for Climate Change from Sierra Leone, to come and make the opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Somebody left a phone here, so I'm going to keep it. The other day I left my phone right here, and fortunately the Rwandan delegation found it for me. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to be here. I have been collaborating with IRENA even before IRENA was formed. I was the UN Special Representative on Energy Issues at that time and also Director General of UNIDO. I want to thank IRENA for the work they are doing and for also not only showing us the possibilities. This message was about possibilities. We see the huge jump in renewable energy penetration. Fatih Birol also told us, Fatih Birol is the Director General of International Energy Agency, that 80% of the new installed capacity in the past year was renewable energy solutions across the world. So they're gaining currency. For us in Africa, it's been very difficult. Less than 3% of the investments are in Africa. And so the question is, what are the barriers? I see now, given where I sit now I have to make things happen in my country, from advocating and analyzing for the last 20 years. Now the president says, lead the renewable energy expansion in your country. And so I've been in office for 1 month, but before that I was in parliament as well for 5 years. So I've seen it from the macro level and now locally in my country, from legislation to now at the executive branch, to see how we make it happen. There are many barriers, but I see 3 key ones. One, in some countries, not all, in some countries, the lack of regulatory, transparent, predictable regulatory frameworks. That is key. If we're talking about big projects, transformative renewable energy projects, you need that. So if you unpack that, you want clear policy from government. You want a clear strategy to implement it, sustained over time, not depending on which party is in politics, is in power at that time. All of that backed by legislation from parliaments. Spending the last 5 years in parliament now, I see how critical they are. Yesterday I had to do a keynote in the Kenyan parliament here. So for a number of countries, including mine, those things are not very clear. They're not very clear yet, and some investors are not confident that they're stable and transparent and available to all. Some of the deals we see are structured to an individual who is coming in at that time. That is key. I'm not talking about the small projects in villages. I'm talking about utility scale renewables that will power industrialization. So getting that regulatory framework and the whole package or suite of policies and acts of parliament you need are crucial. For some of us, we don't have it yet. For those who have it, I see other problems. The macro condition in the country. Number of countries, including those who do not have the right regulatory frameworks. There are problems with fiscal situations. The debt burden is heavy. Because of the risk perception of the countries, most investors come in, they want sovereign guarantees for big projects. These countries cannot do it because, again, they've already made commitments to the World Bank and IMF to manage their macro conditions, so they can't give that sovereign guarantee. For the smaller African countries, it's been very difficult to get big projects in because they can't give those sovereign guarantees. 3, there have been a lot of debates about the tariffs. What should be the tariff? Of course, it is contextual. It depends on the conditions in the country, what people can pay, what they can afford. In my country, there's a lot of arguments over what tariff is a reasonable cost-reflective tariff for the people, given that their income levels are low, but also commercially exciting for the investor to want to make that bet. The last one, I'll add a 4th, that I see now, the debt burden. I am convinced, as I've seen in the advanced countries, as I've seen in Asian countries, if we want renewables to expand as fast as we want them to, public finance is crucial. Public finance meaning our countries must make that bold decision to say we'll put our money in, either to help de-risk those investments or to say we take some of the cost ourselves. We have to do it. But how do you do it when you're constrained fiscally? So I come back to our green assets, which has been part of the debate in the summit, our green assets and our mineral assets. We have to be able, so I take my country as a case study. Right now, 4 weeks in office, I'm looking for investors where we give you every condition you want to get at least 300 megawatts built in the next 2-3 years. Because our electrification rate is less than 30%. In the rural areas, 0 or 1%. But I don't want small projects. I don't want another 10 megawatts. It's not going to do it. It's not going to do it. We need 300 megawatts to show we're serious, but also to meet our energy access needs. And yes, with this declining cost of renewables, my country now, our capital city, relies partly on emergency power. You cannot have emergency power for 10 years. By the time we finish paying for it, it's about $800 million. $800 million, we could have built 3 or 4 power plants. With renewables, maybe 4. So I know already with the renewable energy resources we have, we can do 300 megawatts with solar, backed up with hydro, within 2.5 years. I know investors who can build that in 2 years. But how do we do it if our macro conditions are difficult? We have to value our assets. And I can tell you, which again I link with another panel we helped organize here in the main session on critical minerals. I have seen 4 different companies come to see me in 4 weeks, all of them saying they can do the 300, even without me asking. These are proposals that were there. They are ready to do 300 megawatts for us. But guess what? Provided you give us your critical minerals. Provided you give us your critical minerals. Well, this is not 17th century. This is not 17th century where Africa was just the place where you just extract and go. That's not a good deal. But it is not their fault. It is our fault. It depends on how you negotiate, right? So I don't believe in victims. When I see a lot of young Africans here, my generation, we behave like victims, waiting to receive. Your generation should be different. You talk business. That's what I think President Ruto was saying to his colleagues and all of us. We have assets. Let's value them properly and do the right negotiation. If you're rich, and I know we're rich, you value your assets, you negotiate differently. And yes, Gorbus, I need my 300 megawatts. I've been advocating 30 years. I was there forming IRENA. That's my discussion with Gorbus. How do I get 300 megawatts in 2.5 years? You've done the resource planning for me. I know I have the resources. Nobody has to convince me how much hydro and solar. Wind is not practically in my place. I know what I have. You work with me to create that enabling environment now. All the policies we need. We drive it within a year. We get all the policy frameworks in place. We do the just energy transition plan. And yes, everybody announced here 3.5 billion, 7 billion, 10 billion in finance. Tell me what I have to do. My president is ready. My president is very clear about climate change, about energy and food security. And we need it because without this energy revolution in the rural areas, I cannot achieve my main goal, which is my president's main goal, food security. These are interconnected. Interconnected. To achieve food security, we need power. We need power to irrigate. We need power to plow. We need power to process, to add value to even our agricultural production and to drive economic growth. Youth unemployment is high. We, through agro-industrialization, green industrialization, we can create those jobs. But hopefully for some of our other countries, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Kenya, they can drive the hydrogen revolution, but they want to make the batteries as well. I think that's the negotiations that should be discussed. Kenya should be pushing for that green hydrogen big time. It's a new export avenue. They can lead that revolution. They're already at 92% renewables. Now they say, fine, we'll lead the green hydrogen revolution and the rest of our brothers will follow us. I can see Zimbabwe and Tanzania with the huge deposits of lithium they've just discovered. They say, we make the batteries. South Africa, they should be calling Elon Musk. After all, he's African, right? Did you know that? Elon Musk is South African. The father and mother still there. Our president should be picking up their phone, say, my brother, come visit. What do you need? Don't do the next plan in Mexico. Do it in Kenya. Whatever you need. Because he's determined. He wants to lower that cost of batteries. But guess what? 40% of what he needs, we have it. In Zimbabwe, in Tanzania, in Zambia. The big brother, DRC, 40% of the world's cobalt. Come on, guys. So you young generation, you're not poor. You're not poor. Think differently from us. Think business. Be ambitious. That we want to make the batteries, for God's sake. We have the energy resources in Kenya already to do it. We're next to the coast also. What do you need, Elon? To do 5 plants in Africa. You're right next to the natural resources. That's the deal. It's not aid. It's business. Don't think like our generation. Think like your generation. You want to be rich, but you want to lead technology revolution. You're almost there. But the narrative has to be different. And you tell all those wildcats coming to Africa now that we don't want wildcats anymore. We want big corporations. We want big corporations to build up plants, to make the technologies here, the software that is needed. And yes, we capture and lead the green revolution for the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Yumkela, for such an enlightening perspective. I think you've indeed set us off on the right tone. And now I'd like to invite the rest of the panelists, and I will ask you to join me here in front. As you do that, I will be introducing who you are. So I will invite Mr. Rashid, who is the Executive Director of African Energy Commission, AFEC. He has over 22 years experience in the field of energy, national, regional, and continental level. I'll then invite Mr. Stephen Zioka, who's the Senior Deputy Director for Renewable Energy within the Kenyan Ministry. Stephen, through his work in the ministry, has contributed towards several initiatives to maximize the benefits of energy transition for Kenya. Next, I'll invite my good friend, Mr. Simbini, who's a program officer at the African Union and Development Agency, out in NEPAD. He has extensive experience and plays a pivotal role in coordinating priority energy projects under PIDA, as well as spearheading the development of the Continental Master Plan. Next, I'll have also another good friend of mine, Elizabeth, also my namesake. Elizabeth is an energy efficiency and cooling specialist at the Sustainable Energy for All. She collaboratively led the building transformation environment in Kenya and continues to strive even beyond environment, social, and governance technical leadership. So we'll get started. All right, of course. And I was almost going to speak you, Dr. Yumkala. Please join us. We still have so many questions for you. We still have quite a lot of questions for you. Please do join us in the panel. Sorry about that. I think I have all my panelists. All right. So we'll get started. I wish to thank all the panelists for making time to come and share with us their perspective with us. So, sorry. Okay, Dennis is also here. Dennis, I'm very sorry for not mentioning you. So Dennis is the lead technical expert at EACRI. Dennis has extensive experience in renewable energy and energy efficient sector. His current focus is to creation of a market and institutional conditions to enable the transformation and diffusion of energy efficiency and products across East Africa and SADC regions. All right, so without much further ado, I'd like us to get to the most interesting area. I'd like to request my panelists to keep their statements brief, between 3 to 4 minutes. Maybe now I'll go to Mr. Rashid. Mr. Rashid, since policies are currently instrumental in expediting the adoption of energy transition, what are the examples of key policy enablers that Africa advocates for to create the space for accelerating action on the ground? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, moderator. And also, I would like to thank Irina for the kind invitation. And actually, allow me to just share with you some practical issue and also the position of Africa on energy access and energy transition. I think maybe some of you know that the African Union published the Africa position on energy access and energy transition, I think in July 2022. And this position, it is very clear that Africa need to use all the energy resources in land. And that means Africa need to use renewable energy and non-renewable energy, at least to electrify the continent. We are in the continent with 50% of our population without access to electricity, without any discrimination to any fuel. And I think this is very important starting. And also, I need to highlight also, energy sector, it is not electricity alone. Energy sector, it is wide perspective. Electricity sectors globally is represent only 20% of the global energy supply. And if you look at Africa, electricity sector, maybe they can represent like 10-12% of the total energy supply. So we are not talking only about electricity. We're talking about clean cooking. We're talking about transport. We're talking about several kind of energy. So energy, it is very important for Africa. If you look at Africa now, energy balance globally represent 50% of this energy balance. It is biofuel. Unfortunately, mainly used in clean cooking or in cooking, charcoal and firewood, but still it is renewable energy. Yesterday or the day before yesterday, President Ruto mentioned that Kenya is depend, I think, by 93% of renewable energy, I think. And I think some other countries, they have the same trend. So we can say energy or renewable energy somehow, I can say we have some share in renewable energy or depend on renewable energy. But let me just look very quickly, because you give me only 3 minutes on. So to enable renewable energy, I think renewable energy to play a very good role in energy in our energy transition, we need first of all we need to have sector reform, all energy sector reform. But let me talk about electricity sector reform. We need viable utility. Utilities that they are viable, they can finance themselves, not only depend on the government. And this means we need to have reform in the cost. I think in this summit, I think most of the discussion about the investment. If we need to have more renewable energy in our system, we need really to reduce the cost of capital. And without that, I don't see that renewable energy is expand as we need or as we hope. And cost of capital is very important. And I just give you an example. If you need to have gas-fired power plants and compare with renewable energy power plant, gas power plants you only pay the cost of the capital of the equipment, but the fuel you will pay it along the way. So the cost of the capital for fossil fuel or gas, it is different because renewable energy you need to pay the cost all in the same time in advance. So the cost of the capital is issue, and I think this is a clear message for this summit. We need really to reduce the cost of the capital for Africa, for energy, and of course for renewable energy. And this I think will enable Africa to advance in renewable energy. Especially we have a very good solar, we have very good wind, we have very good hydro. The last things I need to highlight also, yes, we have a potential, but there are some kind of renewable people not aware about it. Wind energy. I don't see many discussion in this about wind energy. We have our resources, but maybe awareness is not there. Maybe the potential assessment, people they don't know what they have from. So we need really to work on the renewable energy that not yet people aware about it, like wind energy, hydro. People they concentrate on is the big hydro, Inga, 1,000 megawatt, but they are small hydro, which I believe it is very important, especially for our area. Half a megawatt, 1 megawatt. It is mature technology. It is cost effective. It can supply energy to the rural area. I think awareness and also the potential assessment, it is very important. I don't need to take too much time. One thing also I need to highlight, clean cooking. We need to work on it because I need to, since we talk about transition, we need to look bigger. Clean cooking, I think it's the African problem and they need solution. 1 billion people without access to electricity. We depend mainly on firewood and charcoal. We have a study, if all Africans, they use LPG, the increase in CO2 emission globally, it is only 4%. So really we need to go for LPG, we need to go for electric cooker, we need to go for improved stove. And one more thing, I think natural gas, it is emerging in the last 10 years. 40% of new discovery of natural gas in Africa, in Mozambique, in Tanzania, in Senegal, in Mauritania. And I think I don't see any way that for Africa to reach universal access for electricity without using the natural gas. Yes, natural gas is a transition fuel, and I think we need to use it. By this, I conclude my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rashid. I think next I would like to bring Mr. Stephen Zioka to bring in the Kenyan perspective. From the Kenyan experience, what can the integration of various forms of renewable energy, such as solar, wind, geothermal, bioenergy, and hydropower, be strategically planned to establish resilient energy systems and localized value chains that will turn the current narrative to stimulate economic growth, some of which I think Dr. Yumkela had already started mentioning, as well as the social progress to reduce global inequalities and create a model for global sustainable energy systems. it's a mouthful, but I will trust you to take it forward.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, with that pregnant question. It's quite loaded, but I will try to address it. In our country, we have we plan our energy sector using what we call least cost power development plan, which the whole sector is involved in planning. And we look at the resource location where it is, especially the renewable energy, be it wind, solar, or hydro, or geothermal. And when they are planning, because if the resource location is very far away from the load center, then it means a lot of we are going to have transmission losses very high, and so sometimes we decide to have the resource being utilized near where it is being generated. And that's the reason why we have the Northern Kenya in the least cost power development plan. We have now decided to go the way for mini grids and solar home systems through a project we are calling Kenya Off Grid Solar Access Project, because we realize that it will take us many years to reach the northern part of Kenya, 14 underserved counties that are very far to reach with the transmission lines. So the only option that we have is to have the resource, having mini grids that are going to be developed around populations that are near the resource, and then we have to go slow on maybe the main power sources like the geothermal, which is a load base. Majorly, it's 49% electricity generation is from geothermal, and hydro. They are our base load. So during the night, we inject in the system wind, especially from Lake Turkana, where we have around 310 megawatts being generated, because the winds are strong at night in Marsabit. And then during the day, it's interesting that we have strong winds around another site we call Kipeto, which is far away. So we inject that into the system so that we have a resilient system. Then during the day, most of the day, we bring on board solar, which can be able to be onboarded on the system. And we have realized that in all cases, the ones who come on grid and the ones who also go undergo off grid, there are so many benefits. For example, I was able to do monitoring and evaluation on one project which is very close to Masai Mara. It was developed, a mini grid was developed in a small center. When it was being developed, people were just looking at it, because everything in that place was being run by gensets. Health facilities were 100 kilometers away from that community. And if you wanted to build a house, you had to go to 100 kilometers to go and have your doors and windows being welded, 100 kilometers. So when that mini grid was developed, then businesses started booming around that place. So the drivers who used to take the tourists to Masai Mara, they would drive back 100 kilometers to locate a lodging. Now, we have guest houses, so many of them around that center because of that mini grid. And we have welding shops that are already there. So the communities nowadays don't go to 100 kilometers to go and buy windows and doors which are welded. So it is being done within that locality. Again, also, for main, if you needed diagnosis health-wise, you have to go 100 kilometers. We've got now clinics that are opening up in that place. Vaccines are being well stored in that place. We have a lot of value addition of, if, the communities are benefiting from this. So we have realized that decentralizing in our planning, when we have this energy which is decentralized, it brings a lot of benefit. Even now, going the way of captive power, we've realized that many industries after having pilot projects with UNEP and Frankfurt School, funding three projects. For example, one here in Nairobi, where um, an entrepreneur was able to develop a cooling plant for meat in one place. Is able to store more than 300,000 kilograms every day and charging 5 shillings per kg for storage. And it has created employment for more than 160. In that facility alone, has created employment for more than 160 Kenyans in that place. So by going the way of mini grids, we believe that if we are going to have 100 mini grids in the northern part, where we have milk and meat being produced in those areas, we are going to create cooling plants, and we are going to create more jobs for Kenyans. Again, also near tea factories, we have also we are developing small hydro as captive power. So the tea factories can be able to tap on the rivers that are near there, develop their own power and feed it into the factories. And this has made the ministry to chase now to follow, because now Kenyans are innovative. Already they are on captive power. So we realize that there is a lot of importation of solar panels and solar batteries and all these to bring in captive power. And we need to guide this sector. So our experience really is making us move forward, and we believe that soon we'll be somewhere. Again, also the green hydrogen, which we are now thinking of developing. We are determined to have green hydrogen coming in as also renewable to generate electricity, and again also to aid in mobility, especially the trucks that are moving. We have more than 4,000 trucks every day moving from Mombasa to Nairobi, and if they can be fueled through the green hydrogen, we will be somewhere. Again, also Kenyans, we need fertilizer, which are currently at high cost. Through green hydrogen, we can be able to reach that. Using the bioenergy, we are targeting to get to clean transition to clean cooking by 2028, and we believe that having bioethanol and the technologies in bioenergy, we can be able to transit from dirty cooking to clean cooking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for that. I think now I'll probably zoom out, but I like in particular the example of the transformative power of renewable energy beyond just the power needs to other social and economic needs for the community. Now I'll go to Mr. Simbini. We would like to zoom out and also look now at a continental level. Want to tell us what role does international collaboration play in Africa's energy transition? How can partnerships between African nations, developed countries, and international organizations be structured to facilitate the transfer of knowledge, capacity building, technical assistance, and financial support needed to unlock Africa's sustainable energy potential and create a model for global energy transition? Over to you.
No, thank you very much, Elizabeth. And let me also start by thanking Irena for inviting us to be part of this esteemed panel to discuss this important subject on Africa's energy transition. So I'll confine my inputs to the work that we have done on the Continental Master Plan and our experiences in terms of the benefits of international collaboration. And also, since energy is broad, I'll also confine it to the electricity sector. So when we started developing the Continental Power Systems Master Plan in 2021, we were debating with two things. The first thing was whether we go ahead with the traditional way of developing continental master plans, where we get a consultant, they come, they do the master plan for us, and then they give us a final product. And we were convinced that that was not the best way that we should take as the continent. The second option was for us to make sure that there was ownership of the final product, and to build capacity to enable the African stakeholders who were involved in this study to be able to do the modeling work and then continue with that so that that process is continuous and they own the models at the end of the day. So together with our partners and with the support of our various partners, which included the European Union, African Development Bank, IRENA, IAEA, Get Transformed, GIZ, we developed an approach where there was we had a combination of support in the form of technical assistance from the from the European Union, as well as capacity building from IRENA and IAEA, the provision of tools to enable the power pools to do the modeling from GIZ, IAEA, as well as Get Transformed. And what we did was that mainly through IRENA, when we were now doing the generational planning and modeling, we structured our modeling work in such a way that there was a training program, and we took 4 training sessions. In those training sessions, the output was the creation of the models that we're then using now to develop the models. And through that, we were able to build capacity within the power pools through the tools that they were provided with, so that they can then be able to continue to update and improve on those models. We also partnered with IRENA to build capacity within the Central African Power Pool. And now, as we are moving to the 3rd phase, where we'll be working with the Central African Power Pool to develop their own regional master plan, it's the power pools that are going to be driving that process. And as we transition from this phase to the next phase, we noticed that in order for there to be ownership at member state level, because currently we've been working through the power pools and the power utilities in their member states, we now need to build that capacity within the member states, so that those ministries of energy, they are equipped and they've got the tools to develop and own those models, and then they will be able to then come up with evidence-based energy transition models that they can continuously improve on. So we have seen the benefit of that through the collaboration that we've had with IRENA and all of the other partners. And based on that experience, now we are going to be working with East African Power Pool to update their own master plan. And we are using a different approach now at a fraction of the cost of what they would have invested if they wanted to develop their master plan. So what they are going to do is that those experts that have been trained through the Continental Power Systems Master Plan are going to lead in terms of developing their own regional master plan. And these are going to be done at member state level, which will then be consolidated into the regional master plan. The second thing that we also see is that before I go to the second thing, I just want to mention that through this collaboration, we were able to mobilize over 10 million in cash and in-kind support from all of this collaboration that we have had with our partners. The second thing that we also see in terms of the importance of that international collaboration and transfer of knowledge and know-how to the member states is in the phase that we are entering now. Our results show that for the continent to be able to achieve universal access by 2040 and to be also be able to industrialize at scale, we need to add over 1,000 gigawatts of new power generation capacity by 2040. And to put that into perspective, the current installed generation capacity on the continent is about 266 gigawatts. And it took us 70 years to develop that capacity. And we are proposing that we need to add 1,000 gigawatts in the next 18 years, which then means that we need a paradigm shift in terms of the way we collaborate with our international partners to bring in that capacity. Of that capacity, 70% will be from renewable energies, from wind, solar, hydrogen, hydropower, battery energy storage, as well as geothermal within Kenya, for example. So it means that using the same experience that we have had, we need to now start to rethink about how we make sure that this is sustainable. The first thing that we will be proposing is that if you look at the way we prepare these projects, we depend on grants. And the capital that we need to be able to achieve that capacity is over 1 trillion, 1.3 trillion US dollars. And that model of having grants is not sustainable in the long term. So we have to start thinking with our partners in terms of how we have a cost recovery mechanism embedded to supporting those key transmission infrastructure as well as power generation infrastructure that we need for the continent to transition. The second thing is that we need to also collaborate to set up those regional markets so that we can then increase the penetration of renewable energies. Just to give you the numbers. If we continue with business as usual, for us to achieve universal access, we will need about 2 trillion US dollars to achieve those goals of the target that I've just mentioned. But through regional integration, we'll be able to reduce that investment to over only 1 trillion US dollars by 2040. So that international collaboration now in this phase that we are entering is going to be very critical so that we then build capacity locally and also create the enabling environment at regional level to enable the penetration of renewable energy and to upscale investment in power generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Teach. And I think you segue us into a very good discussion point on investment. I will request panelists again to keep discussion under 3 minutes. Maybe now I invite Elizabeth. Elizabeth, considering Africa's significant untapped renewable energy potential, why has the region received only a very small fraction of the global investment in renewables? What policy finance mechanism can be implemented to attract more funding and accelerate the adoption of renewable energy technologies? Over to you.
Thank you very much, and I thank you for inviting me to this esteemed panel. I already agree with a lot of what is being said and the narrative of the whole Africa Climate Week and the Climate Summit as well. Even in the opening remarks, we've already got some answers as to why. Lack of awareness is one of the major key elements. If the narrative of Africa has always been victim, 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 then who knows that there's investment opportunities until now that we're changing the narrative. And I like that, the thought process around changing that narrative and showing opportunities of growth. Green growth opportunities have been spoken about for the last few days, but that's just the beginning. So I'd like to move on to something like, a limited market size. I've heard that a lot, but it's limited because a lot of the industries and the sectors are not on the power sector. And when we talk about decarbonization, we talk about clean cooking. We're still on fossil fuels for clean cooking. But if we actually move to e-cooking, e-mobility, then our demand starts growing. But not just as a general conversation, we really need to do the numbers and have the data transition behind it. We've seen the report from IRENA, but the countries actually need to look at it for their own aspect of energy transition and investment plan. There's the element of perceived risks, and as a youngish person in the continent, this perceived risk is something that we live with all the time. So we need to look at mechanisms that actually have investor confidence at the back of it. We've mentioned about policies, regulations that need to really be tidied up, harmonized across the countries. You can't have a really high-level policy in Kenya and one in Tanzania that doesn't speak to each other. We're all on the same border. If I'm going to bring in low inefficient equipment, I would use one border and use our porous borders to get the equipment across. So we really need to look at that harmonization of standards, policies, and regulations. I'd like to add grid reliability. I don't know if you were here 2 weeks ago. We experienced blackout for a couple of days. We have high renewable energy in our grid, as mentioned, but we really need to look at our infrastructure. So with that, the investment confidence can actually come in to say, yes, if we have grid reliability, or beyond that, set up this decentralized infrastructure that we've talked about, captive power that's actually quite innovative regionally, then we can create that. Access to finance. Access to finance has always been an issue. You'll hear the civil society organizations talk about it. The finance that's talked about at high level doesn't get to the people on the ground. And those are some of the issues that I'd like to raise. But it's not just about issues. We have solutions. So in every issue that I've mentioned, you can think about the solutions around it. We've got feed-in tariffs, regulations that are coming up, power purchase agreements that are actually being set up, setting up a renewable portfolio as well. For example, Kenya can actually say, this is the amount of renewable energy that we need by 2050. That gives private sector confidence of a sector that will actually increase over time and have stability. Yes, there's a discussion around tax incentives and investment grants, but as mentioned, it's not sustainable. So we need to think beyond these immediate solutions, but think long term. Auctions for renewable energy. Why don't we have a lot more of that so that we can have competitive, cost-effective renewable energy investment and funding? Green bonds, I'd like to mention we're not doing enough on green bonds and climate finance. Last but not least, there's quite a lot more that we can do. There's risk mitigation insurance, and capacity building and technical assistance. Yes, the youth are being asked to come on board, but if they're not enabled, they can't sit at the table. There's many other issues I can mention and opportunities, but I'd like to pinpoint on one major one: monitoring, reporting, and open data sharing. There's a lot of positive elements around investment in Africa, but we're not sharing that data so that we can build on validation and demonstrate that confidence for investors to actually come on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I like how you segue us into collectively on the Global Stocktech Collective. And now, I think before I come back to you, Dr. Yunkela, maybe first I go to Dennis. Dennis, feel free to come in and share with us your perspective. I'll give you the floor. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Dennis Ariho from the East African Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, and is mandated to promote renewable energy and energy efficiency in the East African community. So what needs to be done to mobilize more investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency? We need an enabling and regulatory environment, especially looking at the regional and continental policy harmonization. For example, looking at regional standards and regional policies. For example, IACRI, working with also SACRI and UNIDO, they have actually supported the development of the ESC regional minimum energy performance standards for lighting, both at ESC and SADC level, and also soon the minimum energy performance standards for cooling appliances. These are the residential refrigerators and room air conditioners. So then also at the same time, we are also supporting the development of the ESC regional energy efficiency policy. So we need to have regional policies for renewable energy and energy efficiency so that countries are able to learn from each other and have the same goals and similar strategies. So we need to have political stability. In many of our countries, so far you can see there is political instability, and this does not favor investment in renewable energy and energy efficiency. When we look at the cost of capital, the interest rates, even in our national banks, they tend to range between 20 to 30%. And yet, when you look at other countries in Europe, USA, and Asia, you find some get at 3%, 5% per annum. So it does not favor the local investors to invest. So for us to have a good, a lot of investments in the space, we need to ensure that both international and local investors participate equally in the sector. When we look at the aspect of awareness and capacity building, we still have unskilled and not well experienced and trained human resource in renewable energy and energy efficiency, and to be able to create an environment for all of the key sector players to play their role, we need them to be capacitated, both on the supply side and the demand side. So when you look at, for example, on the demand side, you find that if there are no energy professionals in the industries, in the commercial institutions, in the ministries and other players, it does not favor investment because you cannot invest in what you don't know. The level of research and development in renewable energy and energy efficiency in the African region is still low. So we need to invest in research, development, and innovation. Both the governments and the development partners need to invest well in research and development because this one will tend to bring in new innovations, new products, and as more people innovate, the prices of renewable energy and energy efficiency reduce. I'm almost finishing. On issues of local manufacturing, it is also very important so that we are able to localize value chains. And we need to have to support the private sector, and we can use maybe the issue of public-private partnerships. And when we look at the key players that we need to support the process, governments, development partners, we need international organizations, private sector, and also the faith-based organizations and the cultural institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. And indeed, I'm seeing a very common theme of agreement in terms of what needs to move forward. Investment seems to be indeed a top priority. Before I go to the last panelist, I want to inform the audience that I'll be soon opening the floor for maybe 1 or 2 questions. If you have any comments, thoughts you'd like to share, do not hesitate to raise your hands. I will maybe have 1 or 2. Maybe lastly, Dr. Yumkela, you painted to us on the barriers and challenges. Maybe just to wrap up this panel session before we open the floor, if you can briefly tell us then how the continent leverages its abundant resources to drive sustainable growth while addressing the energy access challenges, some of which you already mentioned.
To deal with the policy and regulatory issues, as Director General of UNIDO, I indeed push for the establishment of these regional centers, starting with ICRI in Cape Verde, and now there are 3 of them. We need that institutional capacity in the region. It's the same we want to do now for clean cooking. We will establish here in Kenya a clean cooking delivery unit in the presidency. We'll do the same in Sierra Leone. We hope others will do the same, unless we have dedicated entities looking at the clean cooking menace. 1 billion Africans without clean cooking solutions, cutting the trees. Even in Kenya and Ghana, with over 80% electrification, 80% of the people still use charcoal and firewood. So they're not separate. Agricultural processing is still charcoal and firewood. So we're cutting down the trees that should sustain the land and the water systems for agriculture. So you begin to see the interlinkages and, of course, the environmental linkages. Let's assess honestly what our wealth is. That's the beginning. Kenya is doing some of that now. They're looking at their green assets, the forests we have to keep in place, the mangroves we have to keep in place. Let's value them, and that's the challenge that the president of the African Development Bank has thrown in, and you see it in the declaration of the presidents. We should assess our green assets. They're valuable. The rest of the world needs them. It is fact that our Congo Basin and our forests are absorbing more carbon than the Amazon. We're helping the rest of the world. We will save the rest of the world. Why is that not valuable? Why are people telling us we are so poor? So you see in the Heads of State declaration, it is a deliberate declaration about assessing our green assets. It is fact from what the presentation we saw at the beginning and from all we've heard. Every year, emissions are going up. Every year is warmer than the previous year. So is COP a joke? We come, we make the commitments. People tell us they'll reduce emissions. We come back, they say, oops, it's higher than before. But who is going to absorb that? The Africans. We have the forests. So we should value that. The rest of the world should understand. That's why I say the younger Africans have to think different. These are assets. We're saving the rest of the world from the misbehavior of everybody else. What's the value of that? We found out now in this conference that in Europe, carbon is $100 per ton. In Africa, it's $7. You pollute, your carbon is more expensive than my carbon that I'm going to avoid. And then I'm going to absorb for the rest of you. I mean, we need to teach us in leadership that we negotiate differently. We're not victims. When you go as a victim, you're valued less. That's the essence of this conference. For me, when I saw those in the resolutions, I said, voila, our leaders are thinking different. But operationally, it's the guys around here, you, the younger generation, demanding that of the leaders, the ministers of environment, the energy ministers, the finance minister. It is the finance minister who goes to the World Bank, ADB, and other places to say, don't go there as a poor man. Let's talk a better deal. It's the same with the minerals. As I say, everybody on this earth, every major economy wants a piece of the African real estate now. I know. I've been in this business now 30 years. And now I'm sitting in one of those vantage positions. Everybody's coming for lithium, zircon, manganese, you name it. Some of our countries are sitting on such significant amounts of these deposits that for those of us who were studying economics 101 or teaching it, comparative advantage. If I have 16% of a mineral, I'm not poor. Build a plant for me. That's the different conversation. Then the question for you as government is, what do you do to give him confidence to build the plant? It's not charity. The corruption, the governance, the enabling policies. You do it right, capital comes. So I guess I'm pushing for narrative change globally, but I'm pushing for narrative change locally as well, and a sense of responsibility. This change has to happen because we're already paying for climate change. The floods are heavy. We've been here now 1 week. We have 3 islands that are flooded in Sierra Leone. It's not, for us, it's not theory. There's too much rain in Sierra Leone. Others don't have enough. We have too much. It's leaching the soils. It's causing flooding. How do we harvest that? But also, how do we use all, the point from Africa? It's all our resources. Before now, 2 years ago, people did not want to talk about gas. Then conflict happened in Europe. Everybody wants to talk about gas. So let's lead our own narrative. Gas is real. 40% of the new discoveries is ours. It's less polluting. It's easier to integrate it with renewables. The key strategy in Cyprus, which is part of Europe, the key energy transition plan has gas in the middle. So why should Senegal not have gas as part of their transition plan? Why should Mozambique not have it? Why shouldn't we use some of it for fertilizer? So the way you approach the subject matters. If you approach it as a victim, you become a victim.
Very, very, very insightful, and thank you very much for that contribution. I think we'll just open the floor for one question in the interest of time. I see already 2 hands shot up. I'll give it to the 2 gentlemen. Maybe I'll start with the one behind you. Yes, the gentleman with the black jacket and white shirt, and then we'll come to the gentleman in front.
Yes, please come to the back for the questions. Thank you.
I'm Peter Dairo, a policy analyst in the energy sector and also working at Ban Manufacturing. I will mention 2 direct points. We need to address the issue of additionality in Article 6 because if Congo cannot benefit from the forest that they have been preserving for many years because it's not a new investment, then we are saying all the investment Africans have made in preserving our forest, we can't earn from it. So maybe you can comment that. Also on replacing HFO in Kenya with the green hydrogen, can we work allowed that because we can benefit from the compliance carbon markets?
Thank you, Mr. Taido. I'll probably just let the next participant ask the question, and then we'll come back to the panelists.
Yes, thank you very much. Axel Michaelova from Perspectives. My question would relate to the previous question. How do you see the role of international carbon markets to actually mobilize co-funding for the energy transition? and which types of markets would you prefer? Would you prefer the Article 6 or the voluntary market? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I have, okay. Unfortunately, we will not have any more. What I'll do, once we conclude, I'll invite the rest of the questions to interact with the panelists. Maybe at this point, I will check with my panelists, anyone who wants to take any of the questions from either Peter or the other ones, most of them touching on this Article 6. Anyone can take the floor.
Kenya?
Sure, I'll start and more can be added. I just want to talk about the initiatives that are actually out there and they're actually running and they respond to your questions. For example, the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative. That was launched at COP27 by His Excellency Ruto and other leaders as well. That was very much to look at the element around Article 6, but also to bring in the voluntary carbon market discussion, legislation, transparency in the credits to the floor. Because as much as we are advancing with energy transition and investment plans, abating carbon, yes, there's the benefits around that, but we weren't earning from it as Africa. We've already heard about the disparity in the cost of the carbon credits. So it's not a matter of preference. It's also a matter of quickly having activation plans, and this will be launched by COP28 from what I've learned. There's many African countries that have lined up for the support to actually look at their own voluntary carbon markets as well. And that's the competitive advantage that we actually have in looking at, yes, the nature-based solutions, but mitigation efforts as well. As has been mentioned, there is a very quick opportunity around abated carbon, and that's actually ongoing. There's corporates from the rest of the world coming into the continent to say, give me your ESCO energy efficiency projects because I can earn from the voluntary carbon market that is external from Africa. So there's an urgency to actually create that regional legislative registration capacity, but also local on the basis of countrywide. But there's also the aspect of community gains that can be added to that. I will let the others mention towards that as well. Thank you.
Maybe I want to make a comment on Cairo's replacing HFOs with green hydrogen. And that is one of the things that we're intending to do. And even before that, we know that most of our independent power producers, thermal power plants, we are all relying on HFOs. So there's a move to even now import gas and use it before even we got into green hydrogen, so that we can now mitigate this issue of fossil fuels in power generation. I just wanted to make a slight correction in the number of figures of trucks flying between Mombasa and Nairobi. Should be in 2017 it was over 20,000. Now I believe it should be more than 30,000 trucks per day. If now we now can convert how much emissions they are now emitting on the roads by turning now from, if now we have green hydrogen, then I think we'll have a cleaner environment along our roads.
Thank you, panelists. I think I will close it here. I know we'll have some time to interact with you for further questions. In this regard, now I'll invite Mr. Simon to make the closing remarks, and then we'll have the panelist photo. And thank you again for your valuable contributions. I would like to also ask the participants to give our panelists a round of applause.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, panelists, for the very enlightening discussion. Today's dialogue has been nothing short of transformative. It's heartening to see the confluence of great minds joined today to forward the critical agenda of the energy transition in Africa. Our esteemed panelists have graced us with their deep insights, echoing the pressing need to transcend challenges, capitalize on the opportunity that lies in the African energy sector. Their intervention has been reflective on sounding call for robust policies, investment mobilization, technology integration, and fostering collaboration between countries, between organizations. As we advance now toward the momentous global stock take, under the Paris Agreement, it is imperative that we carry forward the momentum gained today to herald an era of sustainable energy that is not just a reaction to climate change, but, as mentioned today, a robust strategy to elevate Africa to a new pinnacle of economic growth and social progress. Again, I would like to thank our panelists for the invaluable contribution and you, esteemed audience, for joining today. Thank you very much. The session.
Ibaridi ni mbaya, ibaridi imetetemeka ya kutosha, kujuni kumbatie. Nimejaribu kahawa, nikajaribu gate. Najua ukikuja utafanya disappear. Shida zangu si za dokta, shida zangu si za vodka. Sema leo utatoka na mimi nitakungoja. Shida zangu si za dokta, shida zangu si za vodka. Sema leo utatoka na mimi nitakungoja. Sema nijipange, sema nijipange, ningependa kukuona leo. Tujipambe, tujipambe, sema nijipange, sema nijipange, ningependa kukuona leo. Tujipambe, ula ula. Natamani lako joto, natamani maso, nimetetemeka ya kutosha, njoo nikumbatie. Nimejaribu blanketi, moto kwenye fireplace. Najua ukikuja utafanya disappear. Shida zangu si za dokta, I'm always scared. Je, nambie utatoka na mimi nitakungoja. Shida zangu si za dokta, shida zangu si za vodka. Je, nambie utatoka na mimi nitakungoja. Sema nijipange, sema nijipange, ningependa kukuona leo. Tujibambe, tujibambe, tujibambe. Sema nijipange, sema nijipange, ningependa kukuona leo. Tujibambe, oh Lord, oh Lord. Baby niambie, baby niambie. Uko down, uko ready, njoo to get busy. 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 this land of another, the comes bigger tell you, bigger way, tell you, in this land of another, the in this land of another, the
Hello, colleagues. If you are here, I am sure you are here for the discussion on critical minerals for a just energy transition. So please, if you can get seated, we should be starting in the next 2 minutes. Please get seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very important discussion today, which is going to be on critical minerals for a just energy transition. And today we have eminent panelists lined up to tap into the details of this very, very crucial and important topic, not just for the continent, but for the entire world. Without much ado, as we dive into the entire program, I would like to invite the eminent panelists to the high table, and starting off with Caroline Aguti from the Ministry of Energy and Minerals. Please give her a round of applause as you take the stage. Chave, the lead climate champion. Team, please take your seat on the high table. And Desiree, the youth advocate from Zimbabwe. Yeah, Garrett Phillips from Africa Development Bank. And Fatima, please, if you can kindly make your way up to the high table here, we will appreciate. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, as I've highlighted already, the discussion on critical minerals for a just energy transition is not one that is important for Africa alone, but one that is